Welcome to Arise, a Widows Forum, and thank you for attending this evening. Can you believe it's the first day of fall already? We are so thankful that you've taken time to join us, and I know you're going to have a great hour of learning and inspiration. I'm Leanne Lorian, and I was one of the people who helped to start Wings for Widows back in 2018. But now many volunteers are bringing their skills and training and their big hearts to us and to the people that we serve. Our primary mission is to provide personalized financial wellness and coaching to help widows move forward with confidence and hope after their loss. But we do so many more things than that. And because I'm a widow myself, I know that healing comes through many means. And my job at Wings for Widows is to offer those opportunities. First, we extend one-to-one companionship to help our clients navigate the lonely journey with another person who's just a little further down the road than they are. We have a team of 8 widows, all different ages and socioeconomic circumstances, who are willing to talk and spend time with you if you just need to talk to someone who understands where you're at. And in addition, we offer enrichment classes where you can take a deeper dive into a topic that will encourage and inspire you to take next steps. Some of our upcoming classes, as you saw on the slides at the beginning, are exploring skills for a meaningful career. That class starts already on October 3rd. So if you're interested, that is a class that will help you to write a resume, use the internet as a search tool for jobs, and practice your interviewing skills. Very practical. And the woman who is leading that is a young widow herself. So go on our website, wingsforwidows.org, and sign up for any of these classes. The other 2 classes that we're offering are Transform Your Relationship with Investing, and that starts on October 9th. That's led by one of our coaches, and it's basically a finance 101. If you don't even know what a mutual fund is, how can you do any of that kind of stuff? Well, she will help you with the basic information you need. And then last but not least, our speaker this evening, Laura, will be presenting her extended workshop on the stories we leave behind, starting October 18th. Please go ahead and visit our website and take advantage of these classes coming up. Now, tonight, you're taking part in the 3rd part of this equation, and that is the Arise Forum. And that ingredient is very important because there are so many topics that are of help to people who are grieving a loss. Not just grief, but other kinds of topics that will help us to think and move forward. I felt like I was being abandoned by so many of the support groups because all they talked about was grief and not about what to do to take next steps in your life. And that's why we tackle some of the things we do on these Wednesday nights. It's just an hour twice a month, but you gain so much information and it's really, really helpful. This forum is being recorded, and that recording will be edited and put onto our website later on, usually by the weekend. So you're able to go back and listen again. Do keep your screen on mute during the presentation, but you can use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions or make comments. And I'll be fielding those later when we are talking with Laura. Now I am very honored to introduce Laura Gilbert, author, teacher, seminar speaker, and workshop facilitator. Laura lives here in Minnesota, where she earned her law degree and a PhD in educational psychology. Laura writes in a practical, friend by your side voice, sharing her personal experiences and creative path she took to meet those common challenges of several things. She's written about going back to school as an adult, how to retire well on a middle income budget, and tonight's topic about downsizing, I guess you would call it, in a meaningful way. I was introduced to Laura's book not long after my husband died, and I found it to be a combination of things I really appreciate: simplifying life, very practical advice, and making meaningful stories out of the things that we own. We all have to answer this question eventually: what am I going to do with my stuff? And Laura has done that very thoughtfully in her book. Welcome, Laura. I'm going to turn over everything to you, and Laura will be sharing some slides with us, and then we'll get on with some questions later on. Be sure and add those to using your chat button later. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. It's really nice to have a big group. I think so many of us have things in our house that we feel like we'd like to start moving on, but there are just lots of questions and challenges with all of that. So I'm gonna share my screen and put up my presentation here. I've got about 25 minutes, half an hour maybe, depending, worth of of stuff. But seriously, so two things that I would suggest is any questions, any comments, put them in chat, and Leanne will just interrupt and anytime. So we can just make this interactive that way. When there are this many people, it's just hard for me to understand where people are. I keep wanting to look for the live audience person to respond to. So having one person interrupt, it works best for me. Anyway, and the other thing is that if you've got some paper and a pen or a pencil nearby, that could come in handy in the middle of the presentations. I've got a few things that I'm going to suggest. So, all right, so the topic tonight is the stories we leave behind. And I wrote this 2 years ago. I published it 2 years ago, and I'm going to try to get it always takes a minute to get to the next slide. All right, so welcome. You are in the right place if you've got a story that you'd like to preserve. If you want to enjoy life, but if you've got some stuff that you're facing, and maybe it doesn't look quite as disheveled as this garage or room or whatever this picture is down at the bottom, maybe it's very organized, but it's still things that you're thinking about. But I know a lot of people have, oh yeah, I've got that. I remember that. So the subtitle of my book, and there's the book, if anybody's interested, The Stories We Leave Behind, and the subtitle is A Legacy-Based Approach to Dealing with Stuff. So what do I mean by a legacy approach? Well, so many times when we're starting to sort through things, or when we're talking with friends about downsizing or sorting through things, there's kind of a thought that it's just an either or. Either this thing is here or it isn't, and that's the end. But I think of things as our possessions as being symbols, that they're symbols of either a story, maybe a value, an experience, or maybe a personality, somebody's personality. And what a legacy approach to downsizing does is it looks across generations to think about what are the stories from our past generations that we want to bring forward, but bring them forward in a way that the next generation can continue with them, can carry them on. And it used to be, as we all know, that it was all the things that were passed along. And the next generation isn't so much interested in that anymore. We'll talk more about that in a minute here. So if there's one takeaway tonight, I would suggest this. The stories we make today create the legacy we leave tomorrow. So again, the stories, the things that we're doing today are really what's creating the legacy that we leave for tomorrow. So a few years ago, before I started all of this, my granddaughter came over and was looking around my living room, and she said, "Where did you get all this stuff, Grandma?" I think she was 4. And I looked around and I thought, well, that's a fair question. And so this is what I came up with. Well, a lot of this stuff actually came over on the boat, or a few things I should say, came over on the boat with the relatives in the 1900s. I don't know if anybody else has that kind of stuff also. But when people came over in the 1900s, they had very few things. And the things that they carried with them oftentimes were symbols of the people that were left behind. And so they were just precious. So they held on to these things. Well, time goes by, the Depression and all sorts of things happen. And by the 1950s, we had the American dream. We had the saying, keeping up with the Joneses, and suddenly life became about collecting stuff. And just for a second, get the image in your mind of the house, the American dream, the suburban house, this the 2 to 3 bedroom, sort of now we think of as smaller house in the 50s, but now we're adding stuff. By the 1980s, the bumper stickers, one of the popular bumper stickers was, "He who dies with the most toys wins." And I know my kids used to say that when I'd say, "You have enough things." "No, he who dies with the most toys wins." So people were collecting more and more and more things because it meant success. It meant that the ancestors had come over for that better life, and that better life was measured and oftentimes by things. Well, what happened was that tiny house from the 1950s, which was more than big enough back then, by 2000, the average home was significantly larger. People had great rooms, they had finished basements, they had maybe even a finished attic. There might be a storage shed out back for all of the outdoor equipment, things like that. And time went on. As of, I say today in the slide, but this is really probably about 1.5 years old, it's worse now. The 40,000 football fields, that's how much stuff is in storage in the United States right now. So many times when I was doing presentations in person, people would come up to me afterwards and say, "We've got 4 storage units," or my in-laws have 2, my parents have 1, my uncle has 1, it's all going to come to me, I don't know what to do with this. So the point here is that if you're feeling overwhelmed at all by stuff, it didn't just happen. And all of these things were purchased for a reason, and they had a reason. And they were symbolic of something at the time, which I think is one of the reasons why it can be hard to let go of things. But we've got a lot. So a little bit about my story. My parents weren't hoarders, but my dad was a gatherer. I think of him as a gatherer. He loved to go, he was a business guy. He was a funeral director, but he loved to be part of like the Chamber of Commerce, and he would go to conferences and all of that. And he had to bring home all the pencils, all of the freebies at all of the exhibit halls. And when he died in 2016, he had a whole, maybe 100 hats with different Wilbert vault and different things on them, but he had lots and lots of things. My mom is somebody who, she became the repository for all of her relatives. So she had gotten all of their things year after year. Sometimes even a neighbor would find something from somebody who had died who knows when, and would send the box to my mom. But my mom had a lot of just health issues and was not good at not only not letting go of anything, but she couldn't organize it either. So what happened when my dad died, and they were in Florida at the time, and I flew down to try to help set things up, help my mom sort of coordinate things, the house was just full of things. And we'd been working on it for a good 20 years. They would have me fly down saying, can you please just help us go through this stuff? Can you please take these things? But as soon as I would get down there, they'd go, well, we might need it someday, or I'm not really ready to let go of that. So until the day she died, which was just a couple months ago now, and right now, tonight, if we all went down to her house in Florida, you would see all of this stuff. This picture that you see is her 90th birthday. You can kind of see behind my dad, there's a stack of things. What you don't see is all the stuff that's all around everywhere else. So my whole point of sharing all of this with you is that it dawned on me several months after my dad had died and I was trying to help my mom, that their best stories had gotten lost in all of this stuff. And the story that had come out of it wasn't their great stories, but it was the story of their struggle with stuff. And I thought, I don't ever want to do that to my kids. And I don't want to live my life that way now. So as I started just sharing with different people, people would say, so how's it going? Or what are you doing? And I would share this. They'd go, oh yeah, I know. I've got all this stuff, or my in-laws have, or my parents have all of this stuff. So I learned that I was far from alone with dealing with generations worth of things in my house. And so I love this sort of garage sale picture here where we're all trying to go, here, will somebody please buy this or take this? And another thing is that I think most of us really kind of wanted a similar thing. The people I was talking to a few years ago, we just wanted a warm and welcoming home. And we wanted to live and leave a pleasant legacy. One of our challenges is that even through my generation, the generation, like my parents, the way that they thought about leaving that legacy was leaving all this stuff. But we can't just pass it on to the next generation. They don't want it, they don't need it, they won't use it. And I think that it's so many times I hear people say things like, oh, they don't care, they don't appreciate. And I don't think that's true at all. I think the world has changed dramatically in the last 30 years. And like these three young folks that you can see here who appear to be on their phone, we call it a phone, but it's really so many devices. I worked at Best Buy a number of years ago, and there was an ad that I saw, an old ad from like around 1990, and it was a full page ad, like in the Star Tribune. And every item that was on that ad, the television, the camcorder, all of those things are now in our smartphones. So anyway, my point here is that the world has just really changed. And part of that is that there's been a real movement to live in our ideal space now. Younger generations have really embraced that with the idea of minimalism. And that's really supports the fact that we live in a global world. And whereas like my dad worked in one job for most of his adult life. Whereas my kids move around, and not only do they move around, I'm in the Twin Cities, but they move around globally sometimes, just depending. It's very different. And so having sort of a minimalistic lifestyle in terms of things makes it really easy to move and be flexible. What that also means is that there's this whole new approach to closing an estate or dealing with things left from a loved one too. And whereas it used to be, we'll just go to grandma's house or grandpa's farm, every weekend for many months and go item by item. The way things tend to happen now is it's more of a weekend approach. And it isn't that everything is done in a weekend at all. But if people are flying in from many different locations, they only have so much vacation time, or so much bereavement time is generally 3 days. And if they have to fly in and kind of look at a house or a condo or whatever, my understanding is from so many people that I've talked to that whether it's estate lawyers or people who help families address all of the things when they're preparing to sell a house, is that the family will come in and kind of take one look. And if it looks like everything can kind of be gone through and big decisions can be made during the weekend, then they'll do it. But if it's completely and totally overwhelming, then it's more about how do we find the dumpsters. So that's just heartbreaking for so many reasons. So how do we navigate this new world to be remembered so that everything doesn't just go, and to preserve the most important themes of our lives and of our loved ones, and still embrace today? So this is where, if you've got a piece of paper and pencil, I'll ask you to do a couple of things. And if you want to share, you can feel free to share in the chat. So how will I be remembered? That's the first question that I had to think about when I decided that I didn't want to do things the way that my parents had. I didn't want to spend my last 20 or 30 years just dealing with stuff. So the question, and it's a real big picture question, is how do I want to be remembered? And if you've got your pencil and paper there, just write down. I'm going to give you just a few seconds, but write down whatever comes to your mind, the first thing that comes to your mind. How do you want to be remembered?
Laura, would it be okay if some people who feel able to do it could put that in the comments in the chat?
Yes, that would be fabulous.
And we could share.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Yep. And then also on the page, since this is a widows group, how did your loved one want to be remembered? What's the first thing? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? And yes, as Leanne said, if you'd like, please share in chat.
So one person said, as a living grandmother.
Awesome. I love that.
Another, as a kind, loving, generous, spiritual person. Loving is another, a prayer warrior for my family.
Nice. Those are great. Those are great.
I want to be remembered for the impact I make on someone's life.
Nice. Nice. If anybody's having if this is a challenge at all, some of the things that help me are thinking about, where do I spend my time and energy? Or where did my loved ones spend their time and energy? Or what were the favorite stories or hopes and dreams? And as I mentioned, this is really sort of starting with that vision. What's the vision of how do I want to be remembered, or how did my loved one want to be remembered? So awesome. Leanne, anything else, or shall I go on to the next slide?
Yeah, go. Nobody put anything else, but I'm sure it just takes some thought to think, how do I want to be remembered? It's like asking, what do I want on my gravestone?
I know.
Not a question that you can answer quickly.
No, it is not. It is not.
But those are all really good ones. And I think for most people, obviously, none of these people said, I want to be remembered for my beautiful pictures or my comfortable couch. You know, that isn't ever on anyone's list. So I think that makes your point right there.
Yeah, exactly. So on to the next slide. Thank you. So this is if you come to the workshop, we'll spend a whole week on this. And I mean, the workshop's just one night a week, but, but there'll be activities to do. So themes. The truth is that we're really remembered by about 3 to 5 big themes. And what I mean by that is a theme is something that's sort of overarching. So some of the things that Leanne read and that you put in chat would fall into that, or would suggest the idea of a theme. Kindness, or making a difference, things like that. So I think of themes almost like the themes are kind of like the panels of an umbrella, and I just wrote a few here. It might be family, activity, resilience, faith. It could be somebody was really into sports. Somebody was really into, they did had a volunteer activity. But we're really remembered by about 3 to 5 big overarching themes. And then the stories of a lifetime fall from those themes. And the thing that's really cool is that different people will remember different stories. So for example, if one of your themes happens to be entertaining, somebody's going to say, do you remember the barbecue that they always did? Every summer it was always, and they always had, this type of barbecue and, something else. And somebody else will come in and go, oh, that was fun, but I remember the Christmas celebration. And another person will come in and go, I remember the glasses that she had. It was always, so different stories will come out of those themes. And one of the keys, I think, whether we're trying to think about downsizing, letting go of some of our own stuff, or that of loved ones, whether it's somebody like a spouse who is our own generation, our own that we've been with for a long time, or if it's relatives, ancestors, might even be like stuff that I had from my great grandmother, who I think I met once when I was 2 or something. But thinking of what their themes were that lived down throughout time. So themes are really the what makes you you. It might be a personal interest, a characteristic, an approach to life, or a value. It can be anything, but it's the essence. And the idea is, when you're looking at all of your things, once you've kind of got an idea of what some of your themes are, and it's kind of fun putting those together, I think, what you want to do is showcase items that bring those themes to life. A friend of mine worked at the History Center in Minnesota, and she was a librarian and archivist, and she worked with photographs, but she had a collection of cameras that she had collected over the years. And she decided that that collection of cameras really showcased her work at the History Center. She could have chosen something else. She could have had a whole lot of other things. But for her, those cameras told the essence of that part of her life. And once she kind of put those in a place where people could see them, the next time her grandkids came in, they were really fascinated, and they were able to engage in conversation. And, Grandma, what are these cameras? And tell me, where did they come from? And suddenly there were all sorts of new stories and new memories happening. So I think figuring out themes can be really helpful. The other thing that I've got here is letting go of distractors. And distractors are the things that get in the way, that might take attention away from the most important, your themes, or the themes that were your loved ones. One of my personal distractors was a little brown jug. It was like those, I think they were called spittoons. Anyway, my mom had given that to me at some point because she needed to get rid of it, and it had to go to the good home. So I had that in my living room for years, and it just bugged me, but I thought, oh, Mom said that probably came from great grandpa. Well, eventually I learned that maybe it didn't, and they weren't really sure where it came from. And here I've been holding on to this. And every day when I would walk in to my house after work, I'd see that instead of seeing my stories or the stories of the big themes of people that were really, really important to me. So that was a distractor. Once that was gone, once I let go of that, then I made space for me and for other things. So the next thing here, and this is the next time you'll use the pen and paper here. So the third piece is, so how do I want to embrace today? So think for just a second here, and I know this is another thing that can take, I did these over days, not in seconds, but over days. But if you could do anything in the next 5 to 10 years, any stuff you wanted to sort through was sorted through. There were no barriers financially, no barriers in terms of health, no barriers in terms of jobs. If you could do anything in the next 5 to 10 years, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And if anybody would be willing, drop it into chat. And Leanne, if you see things, just read those out.
Well, I'll just say mine. I want to try to get to as many national parks as I can.
Nice. Nice. One of the first times that I did this presentation, I was at a library, and when I asked people to think about this, a woman in the middle of the group jumped up and said, I'm going to the beach, and it's not just any beach. And there was some very specific beach someplace that she was, but it was like so clear in her mind. And the whole point here, I apologize. I know these are things that can take a lot of time, but I'm hoping to just give you some things to think about tomorrow or next week or next month also. And the idea is that this is about excitement. It's about, I think, renewal. And once we all kind of have things in the back of our mind that if we could do whatever we wanted, these are the things that we do. So what I suggest to get started on that path to actually being able to do that is, first of all, just notice things. Just start noticing. A lot of times, very friendly, well-meaning people, if they know that we're thinking about downsizing or that we're trying to let go of some things, they'll want to start right in with the task. But that doesn't always work for a whole bunch of reasons. So I suggest just starting by noticing. And one of the first things to notice is those nagging someday projects. Someday I'm going to do this, or someday I'm going to sort through that, or someday I'll do that. For me, one of my someday projects was someday I'm going to learn Spanish. Once I started thinking about my nagging someday projects, and I looked at my entire stack of Spanish tapes and Spanish books, thought, nope, it's not happening. And so I have to confess, I did save 2, but the rest of them went to the library, and it opened up a whole bunch of space, and it unburdened me from something that I had thought I should do. I should be bilingual. Not going to happen. So, and now there's an app. So there's hope for me. Another thing is to start noticing projects that stand between you and tomorrow. Sometimes these can be just small things, and sometimes they can be big things. One woman who came to one of my workshops just before COVID hit was there because she and her husband had envisioned a nonprofit that they wanted to start in Europe. And they had spent like a decade putting everything together and preparing so they could retire early and go do this. And it's something to do with children and education. And anyway, and the year before they were to leave, there are 3 remaining parents, both of his parents and her remaining parent, all died. All of their stuff got moved into this couple's house. And their plan was to rent out their house. And so what was literally standing between them and their dream was dealing with all of these things. So that's why she was there. And then the third thing that I think can be helpful to just notice is old interests, themes, or visions, like almost like me with my Spanish. But an old interest that I noticed was I'd been schlepping around a box of theater stuff from high school for these many decades. When I finally was like, you know what? This was an old interest. It's not something that I'm doing now. And why do I keep moving it to get to the things that really are important? And just noticing that was helpful. So for me, it's important for me to kind of know when I've arrived. How do you know when you're succeeding? And the number one way for me to tell is if my home feels warm and welcoming. So I oftentimes will ask myself, can I relax in my space? Does my home feel like me while still honoring legacy themes from other loved ones? But is there also space for new interests? And some good places for me to begin are, first of all, putting like things together. Sometimes when I think about, okay, I'm going to go through the closet today, that can be overwhelming. And especially if you're going through a loved one's things, I can only imagine how overwhelming that is if it was a spouse. I know how overwhelming it is when it's a parent, but that can be just so overwhelming. But what I can always do is I can notice things that are out of place. How did this screwdriver get into the kitchen? Oh yeah, I was fixing the door, but now I'm going to put it back. And it's amazing when I start just putting like things together and putting things back in their place, in their places, I feel like I've made progress. I get motivated. And along the way, I start to notice other things. And then I can start tackling some of the harder things. Another quick way to start is making current interests really easy to access. So bringing things forward. I'm a bicycle rider, and I now have all of my bicycle stuff really easy to access. I don't have to move other things to get to my bike. And then the third thing that I encourage people to do is to rehome the first round. I think just about everybody that I've talked to that's looking at getting rid of things has at least one or two items that they're ready to let go of, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to get rid of it or who might take it or something like that. And oftentimes it's about asking adult children or asking another family member, would you like this? The challenge with that is that oftentimes we'll ask and we won't get a real clear answer, or we'll get an answer that we just don't believe. So I came up with a mantra that's worked very well for me, and it's called ask, confirm, believe, and act. So now if I'm looking at getting rid of something, but I want to offer it to one of my kids, or I want to offer it to another family member or a friend, I will ask. If they say, no, thank you, I will confirm and say, are you sure? And then if they say, yep, I'm sure, I will believe them. And then I will act. I will get rid of it. What used to happen, and I have several friends who've done the same thing, is we would ask and we'd say, are you sure you don't want it? And then they'd say no, but we'd say, well, they might want it someday. I'm just going to save it. And suddenly we still have a basement full of adult children's things. But anyway, this has worked really well. And amazingly, my kids have been really excited about all of this because it's burdens off of them. It's like I'm listening to them and they're happy. So many times in these last few years since I wrote this book, they'll say, Mom, I told my friend was telling me all about, their parents' situation. I told them about your book because they're dealing with stuff. Anyway, so that's been really kind of fun. And a woman who I spoke to who is She's a stager, a home stager working with realtors. And she also helps a lot of families that are closing an estate or just are really downsizing. And her phrase is keeping everything distinguishes nothing. And I remember that sometimes I pull that into my mind when I'm looking at a whole bunch of things and I'm thinking, but I want to keep it all. It's like, well, you know, keeping it all really distinguishes nothing. So this is sort of my check and balance. So today, I'm happy to say my life's about today's adventures and my favorite stories. My core themes and stories are present, and the environment is inviting and possible. So if I get hit by a meteor tonight, closing the estate should be a healing process rather than a heartbreaking project. Leanne mentioned the workshop that I'm going to be doing there. It's a 5-week workshop, 5 Monday evenings. And the first section is about being ready. And I distinguish that from getting ready. When I think of getting ready, I think of getting the boxes, getting tape, identifying where you're going to give stuff or donate stuff, whatever. But to me, being ready is the most important piece. And that's all of the emotional stuff. It's how do you separate your stories from other people's stories. So many times there's guilt, letting go of something that was an ancestor's who you may not have even known. That was my situation. And I've heard so many other people say similar things. And I think there's a 5 stages of grief that can happen with this process. And we talk about that in the being ready. So the being ready is really an important week. Second week, it's all about envisioning tomorrow. So getting that image of, so what's the goal? Why do I want to move through these things? What's the reward on the other side? Third week is all about discovering themes, your themes of your loved ones. And that's a lot of fun. Fourth week, I call it curating and casting items. So many times we'll have a whole bunch of items that really speak to a theme, but I think of them like actors that are auditioning for a part. There can only be one Hamlet in this play. Which actor is going to play it in this production? And for me, finding just fun, quirky ways to think about things lightens the mood and makes it easier for me to decide and to choose. So that's a fun week too. And then finally, the 5th week, tackling the stuff, is where we talk about a lot of just creative, sort of unusual ways to find new homes, to rehome things, or to just let them go. Anyway, so that's kind of a summary. So in closing, and then just open it wide up, or any questions, comments, don't let possessions be a roadblock to tomorrow, whatever that tomorrow looks like for you. But do preserve and highlight your favorite themes and stories, and those favorite themes and stories of your loved one. And do live the legacy that you hope to leave. So what stories will you leave behind? Thanks.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Very exciting. I just want to mention that if you do take the class that Laura is presenting, or if you want to order her book and not take the class, that's a possibility. If you take the class, it's $20, but that includes the book and that 5-week seminar. If you can't take the class or want to take it maybe some other time, you can order the book through Wings for Widows, and we just ask you to pay for the postage, and that's $4. So if you're interested in getting Laura's book, it's very much more detailed and gives you kind of step-by-steps that will really help you plow through some of these things. My question, and I'm sure there will be others, is how do you know when you're ready to begin this process? And for those of us who are grieving a spouse, there's a lot of emotional baggage attached to things. How do you know when it's time to start and maybe quit working on something like this?
Well, that's the big question. And it's such a personal question. And I think it can be different for the same person on different days, because sometimes I'll get up and I'll be ready to tackle something, and it just feels like I'm motivated and can go. And as soon as I look at it, it's just, I can't deal with it, and I guess I would just say, honor your truth. This is where I get teary-eyed. But I think that's so important. I think it's just so important to honor your truth, whatever your truth is at that moment. And nobody else knows that. Nobody else knows that for sure. So to me, I know when I'm ready to let go of things, when it kind of flows, when I'm thinking, all right, I'm looking at all of these things and yep, I can put this in the giveaway pile, or yep, I can ask somebody about that. And here's an example. I've got 3 paintings that they're not original paintings or anything, but they're nicer than whatever. Anyway, and they've been under my bed for years. And one day I heard about this place that it's kind of it's not really an antique shop. I want to make this a shorter story than it could be. But anyway, but it's like a used thing, antique kind of a place. And if you donate stuff there and ask specifically, because you can put things there on commission, but if you ask specifically, they have a connection with a nonprofit that supports seniors, low-income seniors who have cats. And all of the money from anything that you say specifically, I want it to go to the cat ladies, will go to help people keep their pets. Goes toward food, goes toward vet care. And I thought, I don't need to keep this under my bed anymore. I can donate here because it's going to make somebody happy. So when there's something that flows, to me, that's how I know when I'm ready, but that's tough. We'll talk about that a lot more in the workshop too.
Someone asked the question, how do you deal with your spouse's things that you think could be worth money?
The first thing that I would do is decide if they need to be appraised by a professional appraiser. One of the challenges with so many things is that people will say, general people, friends, family, whatever, oh, that's got to be worth something. And the challenge is, it might be, but what I would do is if you really think that it is something that has value, ask a professional if it does and what that is. Because otherwise it can be real easy to hold on to things thinking that they'll all be worth something. And a lot of people have fun going on eBay, setting up things on eBay and trying to sell them online. That would be a nightmare for me, the idea of trying to collect the money and package everything and worry about breakage and all of that. It's like, nope, I'd rather give it to the cat ladies. But if you're really talking, something that might have value, absolutely go the professional route first, start there.
Another question, you mentioned guilt. How do you let go of stuff without feeling guilty?
Well, that's in the be ready section. I think that one of the challenge here, this is just sort of a really big thought. But I think a lot of times we get burdened unintentionally with somebody else's guilt, because if they had let go of it, if my mom had let go of some of her things, she would have, especially some of the things like from her family or her relatives, she couldn't let go of them because she would feel too guilty. So now I've got them and I'm feeling guilty thinking about letting them go. But it's not really my guilt. It was her guilt, but it's gotten passed on to me. And sorting that piece out has helped me let go of a bunch of things. I still have to, as I'm letting go of something, I'll have to repeat to myself, it's not my guilt. It's not my guilt. It's like inherited guilt sometimes. But otherwise, you know, and this sounds really harsh, but it's your life. And these are your things now. And your life is really valuable. And chances are, your relatives would want you to live your life. When I thought about it sometimes, the relatives that came over for the better life, they came over for the better life. They didn't come over so that we would spend our lives holding on to stuff and feeling bad. That's not what they sacrificed for. But anyway, I think through things like that to just try to help me let go of guilt. But it's your life.
Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. And it is hard when you've lost a spouse to begin to think of yourself as an individual. It takes time and healing for that to begin to take shape in your mind. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, certain things didn't mean as much to me, but certain things I don't think I'll ever let go of. And it's a strange thing, but I've been able to, like you said before, if I know the things are going somewhere where they're really useful, mm-hmm. and even if they're not going to be used, I don't want to know that. I want to think that they're getting used, and don't tell me if they're not, because I'm giving them on that basis, and that is okay with me. But if I thought they were going in a dumpster, of course I would be heartbroken, but I don't want to know that. Yeah. So I think once you let go of them, then you've got to let go of them. Yeah. Not try to see, oh, are they using that, or do they wear that I gave them? Don't go down that path, because that's going to just make it worse. Yeah. Yeah. And I totally heartbreaking question here. A widow with a 6-year-old, and her biggest clutter is her child's toys, and her child doesn't want to get rid of her toys because it's another loss. Yes. And I think we all are that way in a different way. It may not be toys, but fishing gear or our husband's hunting stuff. Yeah. And you giving that away is just another kind of loss. Totally. And one of the things that I don't think I said in the presentation too is that I don't generally talk about my book as a downsizing book, simply because so many times that conjures up, just give it all away. It's like, nope. It's what I try to focus on is what we're preserving. And part of what you preserve, part of the way that you preserve something, part of the way a museum preserves something is they decide what are the distractors, decide what not to keep. But it's not that those things weren't important, it's that there's something else that tells the story even more. So, and those things might be something really, really simple that might not look like it's of value to anybody else, but it has value to you. And that's your story. So I would just honor that for sure. And with kids, I think their emotions are so complex, and they're going through so many different things. I'm not a child psychologist, but I wouldn't pressure. I wouldn't pressure. I would observe. I would just, observe and maybe guide. But I wouldn't pressure them to let go of things, because they will when they're ready. Mhm. I agree. I know sometimes you just put up with the clutter because the clutter is more important than the neatness.
Totally.
In
Absolutely.
this case, I would say that.
Yep.
Okay. I had a couple more questions that I don't know. You probably can't necessarily answer this for everyone, but what are common roadblocks and distractions that cause people to just say, I can't do this anymore and quit? And how do you overcome that?
One of the first distractions, or one of the first roadblocks that I hear about is it's literally that it's all too overwhelming, that they don't know where to start. And in week 5, the tackling the stuff, I have a flow chart. I created a flow chart to just help break those pieces down. And for me, that's where I go back to the low hanging fruit. And when I just need to make progress, I'll think about, so putting like things together. It's like, all right, so all of these things are tools. So let's put all the tools together. Or all the kitchen utensils together. I'll pull everything out of the drawers in the kitchen and look. And when I do that, so many times I realize that I've got extra things that I don't need. And I realize that sounds like more like decluttering. But small steps. So roadblocks, other big roadblocks are just the emotion of the piece. And if there's so much emotion attached, I'd take a step back and just and think about what is it what are the emotions that are connected to the whole of the stuff. I don't know. It's just each person is different. Each person is so very different and has different situations. But I think I guess, and the third thing that I see so often as a roadblock is valuing everything equally. You know, my dad would pick up every pen that he had gotten for free at some exhibit hall and go, this one came from here. And oh yeah. And for him, every one of those pens had a story, and thank heavens they were pens and not like cars, you know, because otherwise, I'm not sure what I'd be dealing with right now. But trying to decide at a real minuscule level sometimes can just be overwhelming too.
Yeah, you get bogged down in the details.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions, and we are coming to the end of our hour. So I want to thank you, especially Laura, and everyone else who's come tonight. This is just so inspirational and helpful. And I think as we kind of look towards winter and think of the long months, you know, if we live in a cold climate, the months that we're kind of cooped up inside, this seems like a really good aspiration to start working on those things. And like you said, take the low-hanging fruit first, and do get support from family and friends if you find it to be emotionally daunting. I don't want anyone to feel guilty about feeling guilty about not dealing with their stuff. You'll know when you're ready.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wanted to also remind everyone that we will be having another one of these forum discussions on the 6th of October, and that will be Rabbi Elena Ziman. And I don't know, this just worked out so perfectly because she is going to talk about writing a letter. She calls it a forever letter. And that's where you impart your story, your legacy, your values to the next generation. And it's something that is a tradition in the Hebrew culture that you would do that. And Jewish people for centuries have done that. And she has written this book to kind of make it accessible to all of us. And it goes right along with what Laura was talking about tonight. So I hope you'll tune in and kind of hear another point of view on this topic of leaving a legacy behind. And I know that for me, I've thought long and hard about how I want to do that for my husband because he didn't have the chance to do that. And I know that that would be meaningful for my family. So I hope you'll tune in. Again, you just have to go to the Wings for Widows website and register, and then they send you the Zoom link. And also check out all the enrichment classes that are coming up. We'd love to have you attend any of those. Thanks again. And thank you especially, Laura. And I'll see you again October 18th when you start your class.
Great.
Yes. And happy evening, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye-bye.